Good afternoon, YouTube. Welcome to Ferret Face Fell Productions. So today we are taking the Talaria Sting out on its first ride. And I was so excited to finally take this bike out. We've been getting it together, and it's totally stock. And we're going to be out here showing you some of the things we like and dislike about this bike. And you know, we're going to let you know. Sadly, a lot of my audio didn't make it through because of the wind, but I'll show you little bits here and there. But we'll talk on the other side.
It is, you can definitely tell it's a smaller wheel. Like,
Hitting stuff.
yeah, hitting stuff is like, and it's probably partially this fork too, but like even just going over some of that, I'm finding the end of the fork.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh yeah, the other thing that's already annoying me, and this annoyed me yesterday, I meant to do something about it, is the battery rattles around.
oh, it does?
Yeah.
Well, the bigger one will be much tighter, probably.
Yeah, and I've got some of that battery foam, so we can pack that in there, but I need to remember that next time. But I can definitely feel the fatigue. I'm putting a lot more weight on the... Standing up's brutal, because you're like...
Because you're really attacking it.
Yeah.
Well, we'll switch. Let me know when you want to switch.
Yeah, let's get to that flowy trail. I want to make an ass out of myself, at least there.
Okay. I start. Okay.
So as you saw there, I had a little bit of some gripes initially right away. So the Talaria Sting is kind of a hybrid between a mountain bike and an electric dirt bike type setup. And with this comes some very interesting ergonomics. Some of the features of the bike are just going to be different. So I think initially when I sit on the Talaria Sting, I think the biggest thing that I notice and gets me is that the stance is very, very leaned forward. The handlebars are extremely low, very, very short bend. It's something for most dirt bike riders that you're not going to like. In fact, I hated it. So this was one of the things we've actually already changed on the bike now, but taking it out for a stock ride, it was definitely difficult to stand up and ride the way that I normally would. But, you know, we get used to things as we ride and stuff. So, you know, I feel like if you're riding one of these stock and not doing anything crazy, it may not be that big of a deal. Now, Meeker Extreme and I wanted to showcase this bike on some single track and some riding out here in Colorado just to prove that this little electric dirt bike is quite capable. I rode it around in some local trails nearby me, and before we did this, not much though. The bike only had a few miles on it by this point, so we were pretty much totally stock and totally new to riding this bike, and I just wanted to show that, hey, even myself, which I don't consider super experienced with how little I get to ride, that we can take this out, have a really good time on even some rocky single track. Now, some other things right away is the suspension is very mountain bike-esque. And we knew right away when we were buying this bike that the D&M forks were probably not going to be our favorite thing. And that's okay. We plan to upgrade the forks either to probably the Talaria factory or maybe some Manitou forks. It's a new world for us. We're not real familiar with mountain bike parts, or, you know, we want something that's as close to what we would get on a normal dirt bike suspension. So that's one thing that I wasn't a huge fan of. The forks are either extremely really too soft, or when you turn them all the way up, they're way too hard. So it wasn't a good middle ground as far as I was concerned, but it was still very rideable, and I still had a good time. It was just something that definitely had to get used to. I'm a little bit spoiled with the the upper end KYB suspension on my Riehu, I think. Now, another thing about the Talaria Sting that everybody always wants to worry about is battery life, battery life, battery life. How much range, how far can you go? Well, this is really just going to vary quite a bit depending on your temperature that you're riding at, how hot or cold. That can have some effects on your range. How you're riding it is going to be a big deal. If you're riding it at much faster speeds, say you're out in the desert or whatever else, you're probably going to go through battery a lot quicker. Now with this rocky slow single track, honestly, we rode for quite some time, and we could have rode a lot longer. By the end of this ride, I think we still had about 40 or 50%. I think we were at like 44% by the time we ended. And we were going for hours. I want to say that this was at least a 3-hour ride. Now, keep in mind, though, this was a lot of slow, rocky single track, so it's not going to be indicative of every experience as far as mileage and time while you're riding. So you're just going to have to play that by ear. And my recommendation, really truthfully, is when you buy one of these bikes to add in the cost of what an upgraded battery is. So we already have a JW, I believe it's a 62 amp hour, 57 amp hour, 60 volt battery. It's one of those two. I can't remember off the top of my head, but nonetheless, the range on that battery is just a whole bunch more. But even stock, I was very happy. You can go out and have a pretty good day on even the stock range on the battery. Now, another big limitation right away from the Talaria Sting was ground clearance. This is something that we get spoiled with on normal dirt bikes. We're used to having probably right around, a foot of clearance to 14 inches on most dirt bikes. And I think the last bike that I had that I really always was schwacking the bottom was my Yamaha XT250, where I just, the forks don't have a lot of room for movement, and I feel like I always hit it. So this was kind of the same, but at the same time, because the wheelbase is shorter, and you've got a lot of torque from the electric motor, you could kind of compensate for not having as much you can compensate for not having as much ground clearance by using some of the torque to pick up the front wheel of the bike and go over things. So this was a little bit different riding, and sure, on my two strokes I do that. It's just with the 2118 setup, I feel like it's pretty effortless. And we do have plans to go to a 2118 setup. We're just waiting on some Warp 9 wheels. And on the note of the ground clearance issue, the stock, I'm not even going to call it a skid plate. Really, it's the aluminum motor cover, controller cover underneath there. It is very thin, and throughout this riding, I feel like I was doing pretty piss poor compared to what I would normally do riding. And a lot of that was because after I'd hit the bottom a few times, I realized if I really smack that hard, it's going to break something. So I was worried about that. That is something I was definitely concerned about. Now, companies do make thick skid plates for these bikes already, the Talaria Sting specifically. I think SXS is the company we bought a skid plate right away. It just came out, so we threw one on there. And I feel like I'm going to feel a lot more comfortable about smashing it into stuff and not worrying about it. Because out here at Penrose, we're pretty renowned, or we're known for breaking bikes. I know I broke a side cover on my Beta 390 without even really a lot of effort. So didn't want to break it first time out, so I kind of felt like I was riding softer than I needed to. Meeker Extreme, if you go check out his videos on this bike, he was definitely riding at a much better pace than I am, but he's a more skilled rider as well. Now, some other things I'd like to note about the Talaria Sting is that it does have good power. In fact, I would equate the stock power from the Talaria Sting. It's very similar to riding a peppier 250, maybe like a WR250R. Now, there's, of course, limitations. The top speed of the bike, I believe, is 45 miles an hour out of the box. And then there's just some weirdness with the way that the power is delivered in its stock form. I think it's very torquey down low, and some people go to bigger sprockets to get more torque out of it. You'll lose a little top end, but stock as it were, it had enough power to get up anything and stuff. So there are times that if you slowed down, you'd kind of screw yourself. And of course, there's no slipping on the clutch or trying to abuse something like that. So I don't know. The power is good. The power is decent. I would say, it's in a happy place. But once again, I feel like the upgraded controllers, like the KO Nano, and then the Back 4000, which is actually the controller that we're putting on the Talaria Sting, they're going to add a lot to the rideability for those of us that are used to 300 two-strokes, or like my 390 Beta. There's just going to be a lot more fun and a lot more capabilities to be unlocked with going with an aftermarket controller and battery setup. Now, it's very expensive. Now, I want to be upfront about this. The Talaria Sting stock price, I believe, is right around $4,500, $4,000, depending on what setup exactly you get. So getting a bigger battery like the JW battery means that you're going to be going up to spending, oh, I don't know, I think we spent $2,300 on the battery. So it's expensive, very expensive. And then if you're going to go to, let's just say the back 4000 controller setup, that's going to be a lot more money. I believe the KO Nano is a lot more affordable. But either way, you're looking at spending $3,000-ish more on top of the bike. So now you're getting into $6,000-7,000 for this electric bike, and that brings in the question: is it worth it compared to buying something like one of our GPX motos, like the FSC 300 and Frontier, or even the 252 stroke version, because that one's only $5,000. That's a really good question, and I think that really depends on what you're looking for. This bike is different. Like I said, it's a hybrid between a mountain bike and an electric dirt bike, and there's something about it that is really fun, and it is so quiet. It is the quietest thing I've ever ridden. It's pleasant. There's no weird noises. I had fun on it. It was the power delivery was much different than a standard bike, so it was just a fun experience. And I think, to me, I believe the money is worth it, and I believe there's a lot more advantages to riding a bike like this sometimes because of the way the torque comes on, and the bike only weighs, I believe, right around 120, 130 pounds. So that's pretty huge. That's a very light bike. You can pick this thing up. It's very light. If you drop it, there's no real big drama about it. So I think that's a big advantage to this bike and how you ride it, and what your cost is going to be in the end once you upgrade it compared to buying something else. And then we also look at maintenance is pretty small on these bikes. When you don't have a whole lot of maintenance to do on these, you really, it brings a really cool advantage into the situation, to where you don't there is a gearbox on the Talaria Sting, but the oil changes are very few and far between, and it's only like a few ounces of oil even at that. So there's really no maintenance on these. Now, battery longevity, I'm not sure. Now, my experience with electric cars tells me that battery longevity is probably going to be pretty good on these. Now, I broke this into kind of a quick first impressions. I didn't want to make this very long for my first video on this, so this is going to be rolling into a part 2, so please stick around for my next video on this. We're still going to be out here doing some single track, same ride, but I hope you enjoyed some of my initial thoughts on the Talaria Sting. We'll catch you on the next one. Ferret Face out.